Hello and welcome to this Reading Room podcast, coming to you as part of the Proud Parents Festival in Hull. Today I'm with Shoo Rayner, children's author, illustrator, champion of reading, storytelling and drawing. Now, I had a good look at your website, which is an excellent website. One of the first things that appears on there is you telling the world that you have or suffer from dyslexia. Being being an author and having dyslexia.
It's like
You've written 170 books. You've illustrated 60 of other people's books, which I assume you got to read first. How does that work? How does it fit in being dyslexic and someone who uses words for a living?
I think over the years I kind of worked it out is that the kind of the word that connects it all together is storytelling, and I always was a storyteller. I think at school and the playground I'd be telling stories. Show and tell was just my absolute favourite thing at school. I could listen to stories all day long. I could listen to show and tell all day long, and I could show and I could tell all day long at school till I had to write, and it would all be fizzing away in my brain. And my hand couldn't keep up with it, and I would just scrawl and to try and keep up. And that went on for a very long time, basically until I got a computer. And then having to type with two fingers had to slow me down. Yeah. And whatever I did type, I could actually read what I wrote on the screen. And I could move the words around, and that kind of changed everything.
Because I know for some people, dyslexia is as much an organisational thing. And so I imagine for somebody who suffered from a kind of dyslexia where organising ideas was difficult, maybe putting a story together would be really difficult. Yeah. But did you find the actual creation of the story straightforward? Is it just the writing that you struggled with?
I think when I first started writing, I just had all the stories were just sort of tumbling out, and I think when I did start writing, then I did find it hard work. And over the years, actually it's various librarians that I've talked to, funnily enough, and I'd be saying, oh, this and that, and this is how and they'd say, have you read this book? And I'd read this book. I read about mind mapping. It was a librarian put me onto mind mapping, all sorts of things. And I found out there are all these ways of organising, which I was never taught at school. But we didn't know about dyslexia when I was at school. And I don't think everybody assumed then everybody thought the same way. And now I've learned that everybody's brains are wired up totally differently. And I make no assumptions about how anybody writes. And I've built up all sorts of strategies along the way. And I've kind of split everything up into what I call my kind of radial thinking stage, where I'm collecting up ideas, and I'm thinking in a circular fashion, and then I see connections in a kind of mind mapping way, and then I kind of see the beginning, I see the middle, I see the end, and then I know that I need to change the way my brain is thinking, and I kind of shift over to the other side of my brain, and then I go into this beginning, middle, and end, and start putting it in a sequential mode. But I never knew that's how it worked before, but now I know that's how the brain works. I know how to do it. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, it does. It does. I mean, I'm somebody who uses the left and right side quite a lot. A lot of musicians do.
Yes.
At some point, you have to be completely free and inventive.
Yeah.
At some point, usually while your hands are still moving on the instrument,
Yeah.
you have to start working out logically where it all fits, because you're going to have to stop and write it all down very shortly.
Yeah.
Now, being an illustrator, it seems that children's books and illustrations go together really closely. As someone who does both, what is the purpose, or what is the role of illustration in a children's book?
Well, I think you'll find that the older children get, there are less illustrations in there. So I think a lot of it is about cueing, and if you're struggling with the words a little bit, then the pictures can help you kind of make sense of the words. I know there are some people who don't agree with that these days, but I'm very much in favour of cueing, and I think the pictures kind of really help you know what's going on in the story, so that if you're struggling with the words a little bit, it makes it easier to read them.
Now, as somebody who illustrates and writes the stories. When you're deciding on a story or a set of characters or a new series, is it the story? Is it a visual thing that's going on in your head? How does being the writer and the illustrator for the same stories, how does that work?
I think most of my stories come in a very instantly wordy way. It might be a pun or something like that, and or a name, but then immediately, then I have to start drawing pictures, and I need to know what the characters look like, and just kind of get the feel of the environment and everything before all the ideas really start coming together. So you'll quite often find a lot of drawings in my sketchbook, and then you'll find that kind of radial moment where I'm starting to bring in all the ideas, and then you'll see the linear bit where I'm plotting out the story.
Now you're somebody who writes specifically for, I mean, there are children's authors that decide they're going to write for teenagers or write for children. A lot of your books are very graded, so there are books for beginning readers and for confident readers and for, you know, how do you work out how you're going to grade a book and make it suitable for a reader of a certain stage?
Instinct. I don't know. I mean, it kind of basically it comes down to that for a sort of a certain age, it's going to be 500 words. For a certain age, it's going to be about 1,000 or 1,500, and then a bit older to about 3,000. And once I know what the length is going to be about, and I'm being commissioned, or I come up with the idea and I go to the publisher and say, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to do it for this age group. I mean, you've got here the Olympia books, which originally I was going to write for younger children, and then the publisher said, we'd like you to make these older. And so I had to, so I said, well, it's got to go up from 1,200 words to 3,000 to allow more ideas to fit in there. And I don't think it's necessarily the longer words, but it's the ideas I think are more complicated.
Is there, I mean, structurally, when you're writing a book and you're thinking, right, so this is for somebody who's, just starting to become an independent reader, for example, is there anything structurally that you do in the books? Obviously, there's going to be bigger words and there's going to be longer, more extended storytelling. But do you actually look at the structure, for example, of sentences? Yeah. And how does that work?
Every time I see an "and" in a sentence, I take it out and put a full stop.
Right. So you definitely got much. Yeah, I did notice with the young readers with the scholastic books that there was very short sentences. Yes. I didn't notice a lot of repetition in these, but I did notice some very similar sentences following on from each other and that kind of thing. Yeah. So are you in the same way that maybe a poet is looking at what they're written and then revising it to scan or rhyme or be more concentrated? Do you rewrite your...
I'm constantly rewriting, and when children ask me how I write, I say it's a bit like rolling out pasta. I don't know if you've ever done that. Oh, yes. And you roll it out and then it all shrinks back again. Yes. And I write the first paragraph and I go and have a cup of tea. And I come back and I think, that's not right. And I kind of perform, I actually read it out aloud as I'm writing it all the time. So I'll have to rewrite the first paragraph, and then I write the second paragraph after going to have a cup of tea. And I come back and it kind of keeps stretching. It gets a little bit and then it sort of shrinks back again, and it slowly, and then like pasta, it goes and it spreads out. And I think I kind of got the voice, I've got the pace, and I've got everything in my head, and then it just writes. But that first bit can take 2 or 3 days, and the last half of the book can take maybe an afternoon. But it's getting the voice of it all, I think. Yeah.
Now, as well as writing books, you do a lot of work in schools and in libraries. I know a lot of authors and children authors will go and visit a school and talk about how they write books. I think the guy that wrote the Billy Brewster books came to my school when I was 7 or 8.
And you remembered?
And I remembered, and I did remember. And I did write a story, but he didn't use it. He did say that he'd look at it. I'm sure he looked at all of them. Yeah. And I don't blame him for not using mine. But the stuff you do in school is much bigger than just going and talking about being a writer. You actually you do workshops and you do storytelling. And you've just been in schools in Hull for 3 days, for 2 days. 3 schools a day. Yeah. That's quite intense. What were you doing?
Yeah. Mostly storytelling, because there isn't time really to build a relationship. So I always ask the children these days who likes stories, or rather who doesn't like stories. And I'm surprised that these boys put their hands up nowadays that wouldn't have once upon a time. And they're getting their stories. They like stories, but they're getting them on PlayStations and things. And what they mean is that they don't like the effort of reading a book. And I think what I'm really trying to do when I kind of perform my stories and talk about them, where they come from, is that I want them to get excited by it and see that a story can be exciting, and that when they open the covers of a book, it isn't just a lot of squiggles. There's a whole other world going on in there, and they can tumble in and be part of it, and that it can be exciting as well, I hope, and funny and sad and all those other things.
So if you had a more extended period in a school, and you would say working with a class for a few days, what kind of things would you be doing with them?
I think when I've done extended things, then again I will kind of explain my working process like I have to you, and all the good writers, the ones who are already good writing, they kind of look at me blankly, and there'll be 2 or 3 boys at the back go, oh, and we'll kind of work through an idea, and we just pluck something out of the air. You know, what subject are you doing now? And just come up with words and anything that has anything to do with it that they know about that subject, and we just look for connections, and if somehow things just appear out of nowhere, and I think it's that showing them how you can just come up with ideas out of the ether, really, I think.
I'm pretty sure I read on your website you describing yourself as a champion of things like storytelling and independent reading. Are you an author or are you an educationalist?
I wonder myself sometimes. And on YouTube, I've got 1,000 videos on YouTube now where I show how to draw. And
Real Easy, if I remember rightly.
There's the Shoo Rayner drawing channel, and there's Draw Stuff Real Easy, which I haven't got time to do them both, so I'm just concentrating on the Shoo Rayner drawing channel now. And I've become a teacher on there, and it was meant to be a marketing thing. And you know, people email me, how do I draw this, how do I draw that? And then people started emailing me, I'm having trouble at art college, and I'm sort of become an agony uncle, and it's really weird.
Yes, it's kind of, it's content as advertising. It may be advertising, but if it's really good marketing tool, then it becomes something that has a life of its own. For example,
it has totally.
So I did the snowman.
There you are.
Yes, there we go. Which I've got to say, I was really impressed with the speed of it.
The wind has blown his scarf around a
yes.
bit.
And what I was going to say was, how come mine doesn't seem to look quite as rotund as yours, but it seems to follow the same lines?
Because you're an individual,
right,
and you do it your way.
Yes.
And I wouldn't want everybody to draw exactly the same thing, and I expect people to want to add their own personality and their own things in it. The Americans always look at that and say, well, you should have 3 balls. Yeah. That's how we do it over here. And, you know, that's a weird English snowman. You know?
I was very impressed with the drawing. And I've got to say that I did that pretty much in real time. I think I paused once.
Oh, right.
Which shows how straightforward and how easy to follow it is, and that was from the Real Easy. Obviously the listeners can't see that, but it's a really exceptionally well drawn snowman.
It's fantastic.
Yes. So when you're teaching children to draw and create stories, are they 2 separate sets of workshops, or are they?
Yeah, they're kind of separate thing. Yes.
Would it be too much to try and get children to draw stories? And
I think it's time, really, and I think even if there's one of my books I show in the reception, and there are no words in it, but I have to explain to them that I actually wrote it first, and I wrote the whole thing in words to get the story and the structure of it, and then did it in pictures, and then because I knew I didn't need the words anymore, and I could draw it all in pictures. And I think you still need that. You've got to work out the story before you can do a storyboard.
Yes, there was a book that I isn't in the library at the moment. I assume it's out. Called, is it MapPad?
Oh yes,
yes.
MapPad.
And what was impressed with that was it's a phonics book.
Yeah.
And when I looked on the website, there was quite serious descriptions of how it all works.
Yeah.
And then I read the story and I realised these characters that is, it's like a book that you'd expect where it's,
Man and a dog and a crab.
man, a dog and a crab. But they've got a hinterland and they've got personality and characters. So how much work do you put into a story, even when you see it as being something that is as functional as a phonics book?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are people at the moment who want to teach phonics without any books, and they say, well, you can't let children see books before they learn phonics, which I think is, well, crazy. Yes. But I think you use whatever you can to teach children to read, and phonics is part of the tools of what you can use. And when I wrote MapPad, I was allowed to use 3-letter words and maybe an S for a plural into 4-letter words, and only the letters S, A, T, P, I, N, M, and D. So there's not a lot to work with. And within that, I saw there was SAT and there was PAD, and I thought it sounds like a satellite map pad kind of thing, and children know about that, and I wanted to bring it all up to date. And it's seeing all the words. It's a bit like a Sudoku puzzle, really, and you kind of put that together. But the story, the trouble with a phonics story is it is stilted because you haven't got all the connecting words. You're not allowed to use the connecting words. And so if a child is just reading those words, it's not really going to make a good story. So the pictures are there to cue what is going on and to help them use the words, and the phonics will help them decode the words that they've got there. So they all mix together as part of the learning to read process.
And sometimes as artists, we thrive under the restrictions.
Yes, I think so, yeah. And deadlines. And
yes. The last thing I wanted to talk about was one that really caught my eye, which is the Euclid, the man who invented geometry, which could be described as a book, because part of it is a book.
I made it a book.
Yes, but it's much, much more than that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tell us about Euclid.
Well, when I was young, then one of my favourite things also was geometry. And when I was young, maths was split into 3 subjects: arithmetic, geometry, and algebra. And I didn't get arithmetic, I didn't get algebra, and I came top in geometry because it was all drawing basically and constructing things. And nowadays, mostly for health and safety reasons, children aren't allowed to use compasses because they have sharp points, and so they don't construct these things. And they're not. I know there's a whole group of children who are visual and physical who need to draw and need to make and to understand things, and they're being sort of made to understand in an intellectual way, and they don't get it. And so I thought maybe I could do a video, I thought. And I thought, how do I go about this? So I just started sort of filming myself drawing the character of Euclid. And I just wrote a little voiceover bit to go with it, to explain a very simple thing. And Euclid is wonderful because he starts from just a point, and he has this axiomatic approach, and we'll start with something everyone can agree with, and then we'll move on. So you get 1 point, you get 2 points. We can all agree with that. If you draw a line between them, you've got a line, or in fact it's a part of a line, but anyway. And you just build and build and build on things that you can agree with and everybody's happy with. And so then I did the next video, and the next video how to do triangles, how to do rectangles and things. And it just built. And then I realised I got all these drawings, and I got all these scripts that I'd written for the videos. I thought, they're chapters for a book. I'll put it all together and make the book as well. And it just grew. I never meant to do it.
So you've got something that is an e-book?
And it's an e-book as well, and it's a physical book too.
And it's available on iPad, and there's accompanying videos.
And there's accompanying videos on YouTube, yeah.
Is not just the idea of a book from an author about Euclid is something that fascinates me. And yeah, I struggled with maths.
Yeah.
My daughter is actually quite good at maths, but
Yeah.
the first thing, well, as soon as I saw this, I thought, that's what I'm going to buy, and this is going to be one of a project for me and my daughter. Is
Right.
we're going to go through this book.
Yeah.
But apart from that, that idea of having video that goes with the book as having interactive elements, did any of that make you think maybe there's another direction to go as well with my authorship of actually creating something that's more interactive?
Yes, but I'm a bit of a control freak, and I think to do that really well, I'll have to work with programmers, and that gets really expensive and complicated. And I've done my own app, but I've done that. I've been there and I've done it, and as we were saying before, the once I start programming, it changes the nature. It rewires my brain, and I don't like it. And I don't like being a programmer. I can do it, and I can turn myself into a programmer, but I don't like what it does to my brain. And it makes me go very kind of logical, and you lose all that kind of weird stuff that comes out of left field somehow. So maybe if some app people came to me and said, "Oh, we really like that, and can we work with you on it?" Then yes. But I'm not going to go out looking for it, because I've got too many other things I want to do, and I haven't got the time to, and I'm not interested in developing it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And I've got too many other things I want to do, and I've discovered, everything is expanding, with apps and this and that, and I find I'm doing too much already, and I just over Christmas I had a big think, and I've said I'm not doing that anymore. And this is where I'm concentrating, because they're just taking me away from what I love and doing best, I think.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to leave you with one thought, which is to quote Cole Porter, or
Right.
to paraphrase Cole Porter, which is what he said about people that wrote words and music. For someone that's an illustrator and a writer, imagine it taking two people to write just one book.
Yes.
Thank you.
I must be schizophrenic.
The Reading Room is produced by Creative Projects Limited in association with the Hull Library Service.